sitting inside an idling vehicle buried under 3 inches of fresh snow, while waiting 15 minutes for the temperature gauge to move, is not protecting your engine. It is causing up to 80% of the total mechanical, where your internal combustion assembly will ever experience across its entire operational lifespan. This widespread winter ritual stems from an outdated mechanical reality of the 1970s and 80s, when engines relied on mechanical carburetors that required ambient intake heat to vaporize heavy fuel droplets before entering the combustion chamber. In a modern fuel-injected engine, allowing the vehicle to sit idling in freezing temperatures initiates a destructive chemical process known as fuel dilution, which begins the second the engine control unit registers an icy intake manifold. To transition from a cold start to stable combustion, the engine control unit triggers an aggressive cold enrichment cycle, commanding the fuel injectors to spray up to 300% more gasoline than normal directly into the cold cylinders. Because cold air density is extremely high and cold metallic cylinder walls prevent gasoline from vaporizing efficiently, much of this excess fuel fails to ignite during the power stroke. Instead of burning cleanly, the unvaporized liquid gasoline coats the icy cylinder walls, immediately dissolving the microscopic film of protective engine oil that guards the piston rings against raw metallic contact. This phenomenon, known in tribology as cylinder wall washing, leaves the hard-coated piston rings scraping directly against bare cast iron or aluminum cylinder liners thousands of times per minute. Without a hydrodynamic oil barrier, metal-to-metal friction causes severe microabrasion and cylinder wall scoring long before the coolant temperature gauge even begins to register heat. As the piston continues its vertical stroke inside the washed cylinder, a secondary chemical degradation process begins beneath the piston crowns that permanently ruins your motor oil. The unburned liquid gasoline clinging to the cylinder walls is scraped downward by the oil control rings, forcing raw fuel directly past the ring gaps and down into the oil pan below. Once liquid gasoline mixes with the engine oil in the sump, it dramatically lowers the lubricant's kinematic viscosity and reduces its high-temperature, high-shear resistance rating. Diluted engine oil loses its structural film strength, rendering the oil pump incapable of maintaining adequate hydraulic pressure at low idling speeds to protect sensitive journal bearings. When the oil film collapses under low hydraulic pressure, the crankshaft journals make direct metallic contact with the rod bearings, causing localized overheating and accelerated bearing material degradation. Furthermore, an engine idling in freezing weather takes up to 20 minutes to reach its true operating temperature, allowing water vapor from combustion blowby to condense along the cold interior crankcase walls. This condensed water churns together with the raw fuel and carbon soot sitting in the oil pan, creating an acidic, black chemical emulsion commonly referred to as engine sludge. This toxic sludge gradually thickens until it starves the oil pickup tube screen, causing catastrophic oil starvation across the valvetrain and variable valve timing solenoids during future cold starts. When variable valve timing solenoids are starved of adequate hydraulic pressure, the camshaft phasers chatter against their internal locking pins, causing severe mechanical fatigue in the timing chain assembly. Shifting the perspective from fluid chemistry to thermodynamics reveals why idling is mathematically the least efficient way to warm up a metallic structure. An internal combustion engine generates thermal energy primarily through mechanical work under load, not through low-pressure idle combustion cycles. At an idle speed of 800 revolutions per minute, the engine produces minimal heat energy, prolonging the dangerous cold start friction window by up to 400% compared to active driving. The thermal expansion coefficient of aluminum pistons differs significantly from that of cast iron cylinder blocks, meaning cold pistons are artificially loose inside their bores upon initial startup. Allowing an engine to idle cold prolongs piston slap, a condition where the loose piston skirt rocks laterally against the cylinder wall, creating microfractures in the piston skirt coating. When you put the vehicle in drive 30 seconds after startup and proceed with gentle acceleration, the engine performs real mechanical work, increasing internal cylinder pressures and expanding the aluminum pistons rapidly to their engineered operational clearances. Gentle driving under moderate load allows the engine to reach its optimal thermal operating window of 190 degrees Fahrenheit in a fraction of the time, drastically shortening the duration of fuel enrichment cycles. By accelerating the warm-up timeline through gentle driving, you allow the oil pump to build full volume pressure quickly, splashing oil onto the upper valvetrain while minimizing cylinder wall exposure to raw, unburned gasoline. Higher engine speeds during gentle driving increase the oil pump shaft speed, forcing thick cold oil through the full-flow filter and into the cylinder head galleries much faster than idling ever could. This rapid pressurization of the cylinder head protects the dual overhead camshaft lobes, bucket tappets, and hydraulic lash adjusters from dry friction wear. Beyond the immediate damage occurring inside the combustion chamber and oil pan, prolonged winter idling inflicts severe secondary destruction on your vehicle's exhaust and emissions control systems. During the cold enrichment phase, the engine exhausts significant quantities of unburned hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, and raw carbon soot directly into the cold exhaust manifold. Because a catalytic converter requires internal temperatures exceeding 600 degrees Fahrenheit to initiate light-off and burn off harmful emissions, idling keeps the catalytic converter cold and inactive for extended periods. The thick, unburned fuel mixture enters the cold honeycomb ceramic core of the catalytic converter, coating the precious platinum, palladium, and rhodium catalytic surfaces in raw fuel residue and dense soot. Over time, this continuous fuel contamination poisons the catalytic reaction sites, causing premature catalytic converter failure and triggering costly check engine light faults for catalytic efficiency. Thermal shock also plays a massive role in exhaust destruction. When cold liquid fuel accumulates in a freezing catalytic converter and suddenly ignites, local thermal hot spots crack the delicate ceramic substrate. For modern diesel engines equipped with diesel particulate filters, idling in freezing temperatures presents an even more immediate financial threat. Cold diesel idle combustion produces high volumes of wet soot that rapidly clog the microscopic channels of the diesel particulate filter, long before the exhaust reaches temperatures hot enough to trigger passive regeneration. As soot accumulates inside the cold exhaust filter, back pressure rises sharply, forcing the engine control unit to initiate active regeneration cycles that further dilute the engine oil with post-injected diesel fuel. During an active regeneration cycle forced by excessive idling soot, the engine injects diesel fuel directly on the exhaust stroke, causing severe washing of the cylinder walls and driving fuel contamination in the sump to dangerous levels. Additionally, unburned soot from extended winter idling builds up directly on the ground electrodes and ceramic insulators of your spark plugs. This thick layer of conductive carbon causes electrical tracking, leading to misfires, rough idling, poor fuel economy, and eventual ignition coil failure during high-load driving. When a spark plug misfires due to carbon fouling, raw unburned fuel bypasses the combustion chamber entirely, flowing straight down the exhaust pipe to further melt the catalytic converter core. In direct injection engines, Cold idling accelerates carbon buildup on the backs of the intake valves, as cold oil vapors from the positive crankcase ventilation system bake onto the cold metal surfaces without any fuel spray to wash them clean. Over thousands of miles of winter idling, this carbon crust grows thick enough to restrict intake airflow, causing rough cold starts, hesitation under acceleration, and severe power loss that requires manual media blasting to restore. Having examined the chemistry of fuel dilution, the thermodynamics of engine warming, the mechanics of bearing wear, and the destruction of exhaust components, we can establish the definitive, engineering-backed cold weather startup protocol. The absolute correct procedure when starting a modern vehicle in sub-zero weather begins by starting the ignition and waiting only 30 to 60 seconds. This brief 30-second pause allows the oil pump to draw fluid from the pan, fully pressurize the main journal bearings, and fill the hydraulic valve lifters and variable valve timing actuators with oil. Within those first 30 seconds, cold oil pressure spikes to its maximum safety relief valve threshold, ensuring that every critical friction surface in the engine has received a continuous supply of lubricant. Once that initial 30-second oil pressure buildup is complete, immediately place the vehicle in gear and drive off smoothly, keeping engine speeds below 3,000 revolutions per minute until the engine reaches normal operating temperature. By driving gently, you load the engine enough to generate rapid heat, reducing the cold enrichment phase from 20 minutes down to less than 3 minutes while avoiding excessive engine stress. Operating the engine under light load increases combustion chamber temperatures quickly, which instantly vaporizes injected fuel droplets and completely eliminates the phenomenon of cylinder wall washing. Furthermore, elevated operating temperatures allow the engine oil in the sump to reach over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, a critical threshold that allows trapped moisture and raw gasoline to evaporate safely out of the crankcase via the PCV system. The only legitimate exception to this immediate drive rule is when windshield icing completely obstructs driver visibility, creating a severe safety hazard that requires defrosting heat before entering traffic. In every other scenario, leaving your car idling unattended under the snow for 15 minutes is actively destroying your engine's internal components, diluting your oil, scoring your cylinder walls, and clogging your exhaust system. Understanding the real chemical, thermal, and tribological realities of cold starts allows you to break away from outdated winter habits and protect your engine from thousands of dollars in premature mechanical failure.